Hello, and welcome back to the SCP series, where I tell you about 5 different SCPs each video. We are currently going over the Euclid class SCPs. Now before this video starts, I must put a disclaimer, where I will be reading each SCP's description directly from the SCP Wiki. None of the information that I will be telling you is of my own writing. With all that said, let's get right into it.
SCP-2430 is a humanoid entity with a physical appearance identical to the late Adolf Hitler, from 1889 to 1945, measuring at 173 centimeters in height and 72 kilograms in mass. Its internal body systems are consistent with those of non-anomalous humans, though its organs are functionless. SCP-2430's physical state deviates from non-anomalous humans in the following aspects. DNA analysis indicates that SCP-2430's genetic makeup is derived from a combination of wild boar and domestic goat. Furthermore, SCP-2430's skeletal system is identified to be an amalgamation of bones from 8 different individuals. The identities of these individuals are unknown. Brain matter is composed of a mixture of specimen from wild boar and domestic goat. No requirement for food, water, or air, despite the presence of a digestive system and respiratory system. Modifications to its nervous system such that pain sensitivity is heightened. Lack of hair follicles, instead, synthetic hair strands have been attached onto SCP-2430's head and face such that they resemble the late Hitler's hair and mustache. Inability to produce speech. Traces of potassium cyanide and leg fragments identified in SCP-2430's bloodstream and subcutis, respectively. SCP-2430's anomalous quality is its capacity to regenerate muscle and skin tissues, allowing it to recover from injuries and regrow organs that have been removed from its body. Wounds and incisions on SCP-2430's body will regenerate within 3 days after causation, while organ regeneration requires up to 2 weeks. See Document 2430A for a complete list of organ regeneration rates. However, SCP-2430's regenerative capacity does not encompass damages to its skeletal system, and healing rate of bone fractures is similar to that of non-anomalous humans. Tissue samples extracted from SCP-2430 do not possess this regenerative capacity. SCP-2430 was recovered in Buenos Aires, Argentina on 1960 in the residence of the late who is associated with Obscura. Initially discovered by Mossad agents who had captured SCP-2430 was extradited to the Foundation upon discovery of its anomalous properties and Mossad agents' inability to terminate SCP-2430. SCP-027 appears to be a phenomenon of unknown sources that seem to be tied to one human subject at a time. As host to SCP-027, Subject 02702 is constantly surrounded by swarming vermin that are drawn to his location. The subject does not appear to be able to assert control over these creatures in any way. It is in fact prone to occasional attacks from feral specimens. These creatures have also been known to attack personnel who approach too closely. Wherever the subject goes, an initial swarm of flying insects such as gnats and flies will start to form a cloud around him, usually within 2 to 3 minutes. Shortly thereafter, crawling animals including lice, cockroaches, worms, spiders, data-expunged mice, and rats will begin to appear. The longer the subject remains in a location, the more vermin will gather there. When the subject leaves a location, some of these creatures will follow, but most will disperse. SCP-027 has been known to transfer between hosts once upon the death of the first known host, Subject 02701. Since SCP-027 could likely repeat this feat upon the death of Subject 02702, all high-value personnel should be kept far away from the current host until more about SCP-027 is understood. SCP-027 has also likely transferred between hosts an unknown number of times before containment. Research into potential previous hosts has commenced, with preliminary evidence suggesting that SCP-027 may have existed for at least years. It is not known yet how SCP-027 chooses or attracts animals, or even what SCP-027 exactly is. The previous host never expressed having any sort of communication with a separate conscious entity. Analysis of the current host has been inconclusive at best. SCP-049 is a humanoid entity, roughly 1.9 meters in height, which bears the appearance of a medieval plague doctor. While SCP-049 appears to be wearing the thick robes and the ceramic mask indicative of that profession, the garments instead seem to have grown out of SCP-049's body over time, and are now nearly indistinguishable from whatever form is beneath them. X-rays indicate that despite this, SCP-049 does not have a humanoid skeletal structure beneath its outer layer. SCP-049 is capable of speech in a variety of languages, though tends to prefer English or medieval French. While SCP-049 is generally cordial and cooperative with the Foundation staff, it can become especially irritated or at times outright aggressive if it feels that it is in the presence of what it calls the pestilence. Although the exact nature of this pestilence is currently unknown to Foundation researchers, it does seem to be an issue of immense concern to SCP-049. SCP-049 will become hostile with individuals it sees as being affected by the pestilence, often having to be restrained should it encounter such. If left unchecked, SCP-049 will generally attempt to kill any such individual. SCP-049 is capable of causing all biological functions of an organism to cease through direct contact. How this occurs is currently unknown, and autopsies of SCP-049's victims have invariably been inconclusive. SCP-049 has experienced frustration or remorse after these killings, indicating that they have done little to kill the pestilence, though will usually seek to then perform a crude surgery on the corpse using the implements contained within a black doctor's bag it carries on its person at all times. While these surgeries are not always successful, they often result in the creation of instances of SCP-0492. SCP-0492 instances are reanimated corpses that have been operated on by SCP-049. These instances do not seem to retain any of their prior memories or mental functions, having only basic motor skills and response mechanisms. While these instances are generally inactive, moving very little and in generally ambulatory fashion, they can become extremely aggressive if provoked or if directed to by SCP-049. SCP-0492 instances express active biological functions, though these are vastly different from currently understood human physiology. Despite these alterations, SCP-049 often remarks that the subjects have been cured. SCP-049 was discovered during the investigation of a series of unknown disappearances in the town of Montauban in southern France. During a raid on a local home, investigators found several instances of SCP-0492, as well as SCP-049. While law enforcement personnel engaged the hostile 0492 instances, SCP-049 was noted as watching the engagement and taking notes in its journal. After all of the 0492 instances were dispatched, SCP-049 willingly entered Foundation custody. Moved to Site 19, 1993. Origin is as of yet unknown. It is constructed from concrete and rebar with traces of Krylon brand spray paint. SCP-173 is animate and extremely hostile. The object cannot move while within a direct line of sight. Line of sight must not be broken at any time with SCP-173. Personnel assigned to enter container are instructed to alert one another before blinking. Object is reported to attack by snapping the neck at the base of the skull, or by strangulation. In the event of an attack, personnel are to observe Class 4 hazardous object containment procedures. Personnel report sounds of scraping stone originating from within the container when no one is present inside. This is considered normal, and any change in this behavior should be reported to the acting HMCL supervisor on duty. The reddish-brown substance on the floor is a combination of feces and blood. Origin of these matters is unknown. The enclosure must be cleaned on bi-weekly basis. Discovered in the Altai Mountains during a routine fact-finding mission, SCP-594 is a flock of feral sheep of an unknown breed, resembling a wild Argali sheep in general build, with a thick fleece like that of a domestic merino, around 135 cm at the shoulder and weighing 195 kg on average. The sheep are highly aggressive and territorial in nature, and often attacked unfamiliar personnel without warning or provocation. They will continue to behave in this manner until steps are taken to properly placate 59401, which is normally done by giving it treats, such as tobacco or candies. Once this is done, the flock will become docile and behave like normal domestic sheep. The exceptions to this pacifying behavior are 59402 and 59403, as outlined in the appendium on each. In contrast to adults, lambs typically are very easy to handle and display curiosity towards new objects and people in the paddock, often attempting to play with personnel but willfully if threatened. The sound of a panicked lamb will cause nearby adults to attack violently, so caution is to be taken not to spook lambs. Lambs also show a tendency to form attachments to certain humans, often following them around the paddock and begging for food or attention. This is especially noticeable among bottle-reared lambs. Such attachments often last even after sheep has reached maturity, as seen in the case of 59402 and Dr. Merriweather. The defining characteristic of of the sheep is that they are able to generate a substantial amount of static electricity simply by the friction caused during daily activities. The resultant charge is typically discharged at random, with mature specimens producing arc flashes that have been recorded at 1000 amps or more. Due to the electrocution hazard, personnel interacting with SCP-594 are advised to follow guidelines fully outlined in Document 594-4H. When faced with a threat, the flock will become highly agitated and mature ewes will attempt to form a ring around any lambs, rubbing their bodies together to generate an even greater static charge between them. Because this defensive behavior is especially pronounced when ewes are birthing, it is standard procedure to isolate all pregnant ewes and newborn lambs from the rest of the flock until a week after birthing.
This concludes today's documentation. I apologize if you had a hard time understanding what I was saying because of any stuttering or word jumble. If I've missed any information or have gotten something wrong, please comment down below and share your thoughts. Until next time, friends, stay safe.